If you don't make money, it's hard to grow.
How do you see the implementation of AI in our industry?
I saw that there's a huge, a mega trend happening where the price of solar panels is going to come down very, dramatically.
Do you feel similar culture here when you work with the local teams in the Middle East? Hello everyone, and welcome to Masters of Green MENA, the podcast where we sit down with the industry's brightest minds, leaders and change makers shaping the future of renewable energy in the Middle East and Africa. I'm your host Munif Barakat. Let's dive into today's episode. Enjoy. I'm joined today by Andrew Worden, the Executive Chairman and founder of GameChange Solar. You're welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
For those that don't know you yet, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience? Tell us a little bit more about you, please.
Yeah, sure. So I'm from Boston, Massachusetts, which is much colder than Dubai. My mother is always very into the environment, so that's I grew up, with that in mind. And my mother also was a scientist. So a little background there. And then I went to Harvard University and also across the road at MIT, studied a lot of engineering, computer science, math, geology, physics, all the hard stuff. I was supposed to be pre-med, but I decided not to do that because I wanted to do things. I mean, doctors are great. They help the world in a huge way,
of course,
helping one at a time. But I sought the opportunity to influence hundreds of thousands or millions of people in good ways, green energy and biotech. So I was after Harvard, I came to New York. I ran an investment fund. Over 25 years, made 173 investments, sometimes acquiring companies, sometimes just interested in them. Mm-hmm. I also, along the way, invested in a lot of companies making steel parts and so on. Yes. So just a little background. And then in 2010, I saw that there's a huge, a mega trend happening mm-hmm. where the price of solar panels was going to come down very, dramatically. Mm-hmm. And that would make an opportunity for solar to become the number one energy generation source in the world. And I started building solar power plants before anything else. We also had a company that constructed them. Oh. So within a few years, I learned that the racking that held them up, the panels, were really overpriced, poorly engineered, low-grade steel. So we decided to start GameChange. We called it the GameChange Racking at the time in 2012. Mm-hmm. And that business took off really fast. So I decided to completely focus on that. So I sold off the final investments in my investment fund because I had been making it all my own money by then. Nice. So really didn't have many investors anymore because I'd been buying them out at good prices for them. Mm-hmm. They all made money. And then also I sold off the power plants, closed down the EPC, and completely focused on GameChange by 2014. The GameChange then absolutely took off. Well, I guess we can get into that in a little bit. Mm-hmm.
Cool. From what you say, Andrew, I'll take a couple of keywords then. You mentioned your intention to do good at a scale, not at an individual level, which is interesting. And you're combining technology because you have this computer science background with renewables. Bringing that into this world actually created an amazing product that you developed in GameChange Solar. So I want to ask you, since GameChange Solar relatively is, I would say, not very old in the market, but today you are in the top 3 players in the world. So it took you a relatively short time to climb up the whole ladder and to reach the top 3. How did you achieve that in such a short period of time?
So that's a good question, yeah. We started on fixed tilt racks in 2012. In 2015, we went around and talked to our customers. And we said, what do you want now? Mm-hmm. And they said there's only 2 tracker companies that are kind of taking advantage of that situation and charging too much, and the products needed some help. So we started making the trackers in 2015. The trackers are perhaps more interesting because they make more energy than the ones that are fixed facing the sun. Mm-hmm. They also make energy at a better time of day. Mm-hmm. And they make it more steadily through the day. Mm-hmm. So that's important. It makes the technology much more relevant than the fixed tilt. We still sell fixed tilt and also trackers, but trackers are probably 90% of our business. Mm-hmm. So it's a good question about the computer science background. We had to write code to have them follow the sun. Also, more recent advantages are caused by the panels facing certain directions when it's cloudy, although that's not so helpful in the Middle East.
Yeah.
So
Still it happens eventually.
yeah, a little bit, but yeah, we sell, of course, all around the world.
Mm-hmm.
In some areas, it's very important. But anyway, so the other technologies, when the wind is kicking up, it's important to go to your protective position, which is a certain angle.
Mm-hmm.
And there's ways to kind of play with the wind speed to take advantage of the most uptime facing the sun, even when those events are happening. And so that technology is important. And understanding, how the code is written and so on was, especially at the beginning when we were just developing the product, very important. So another question is, how do we ramp this thing up relatively quickly? So we've had a huge growth rate every year, averaging about 50 to 60% per year. I think part of that is based on the fact that we understood how to use higher strength steel for a little higher price and much higher strength steel. Also, understanding the marketing and how that works. When I was at MIT, I studied some marketing as well. Kind of a combination to get the word out quickly. So more energy, better value price because better steel strength, and also the marketing to get the word around. So, we launched our tracker in 2015, and as you said, we're now number 3 in the world, and we will be number 2 pretty soon.
Amazing. So from your words, Andrew, like being an investment, New York, starting a business, doing all of what you have just mentioned. You mentioned product development, you scaling up the operations, doing marketing, all of that. So I feel there's a builder inside of you, like or a very, let's say, this intention to really build something like that's big and contribute to the energy transition, as you said. How would you comment on that? What do you feel when you see your company that you have founded growing about 50, 60% annually in such a competitive market, which is very difficult? Many players in the tracker business, they are out of business, have quit the market in the last 10 years, but you managed to grow up that fast. So how does it make you feel inside to build up such a big empire?
It's fun. I mean, I started as an entrepreneur. I was very young. When I was 16 years old, my brother and I started a landscaping business, cutting lawns. I don't think that business would be great in Dubai, but it's really good from where I'm from in Boston, And so I learned very young about how to grow a business, about employees and so on. And I've founded quite a few other companies along the way with investing. And I've also been investing in companies. It was helpful to see what was working and what was not. So yeah, it makes me happy. It's a great combination. I say green and green because our money in the United States is green. It's about the environment. It's also about making money. If you don't make money, it's hard to grow. So you have to be careful and make sure you are a profitable business. Some sales you have to turn down because we don't want to lose money. We need to do okay, not crazy well, but just okay in the profit. So that's helped us to grow something that's really meaningful. And just to wander for a second on that. So going back to my mom's, environmental bent, what we're doing is it's great for the environment, and we do have limited resources. I think, just to guess, part of the reason Saudi Arabia is doing solar is because oil is super valuable, and solar energy will allow them to use that resource for a longer time. So no need for oil making it energy. But also, the other thing is we're helping so many millions of people with really affordable electricity. And a lot of the markets, we're in, electricity being affordable is very important. We don't just, work here in Saudi Arabia, Oman and countries like that, but also in Egypt, for example, where energy is important. And the rest of Africa, for example, a lot of people just don't have energy, which is electricity, which is super important for the whole economy and for the people to individually prosper. So I think it's really important what we're doing, not just in making money, but also, most importantly, helping people and helping the environment.
And to be honest, this you bring me to the next topic that I want to discuss. I see a huge interest that's from your side in the region, the Middle East, and you mentioned Egypt, so the whole MENA region. And I've seen also we read in the news about serious investments, not just to sell in here, but also to do local manufacturing in Saudi Arabia, which would typically contribute a lot to the local ecosystem. Tell me, please, um, what makes you bullish about the region in here and having this such kind of a big investment to manufacture your products in Saudi Arabia?
So yeah, local manufacturing is important. I mean, we also have local manufacturing in other areas around the world, Brazil, South Africa, India, China, Malaysia, Vietnam, Thailand, Cambodia.
Yeah.
So, creating jobs for people is important. It gives people a better quality of life. And creating manufacturing in the Middle East is important because a lot of the legacy here is from fossil fuels, which is what it is. It's okay. But to diversify into tourism like Dubai, finance, trading, manufacturing, especially in Saudi Arabia, they really want to build a manufacturing base. It feels good to help develop these countries and give people decent paying jobs. So it's important. And we've built a substantial manufacturing footprint in Saudi Arabia. We've been hiring people here in Dubai, obviously administration, engineering, support, so on like that. So, and also with the jobs to build these power plants. So, we're active in Oman and really in a big way in Saudi Arabia and Egypt. We're by far the biggest in Egypt, which is creating a lot of jobs, thousands and thousands of jobs, employing people to build these solar farms. And as I said, helping with the energy generation there.
Nice. And with that, especially I think with the Vision 2030 of Saudi Arabia, where there's a complete transition for the local economy, capacity building, like by having the local, let's say, human resources in Saudi Arabia being qualified for such sophisticated jobs, like producing such technology. How do you see this, let's say, GameChange contributing to that for the, let's say, local operations in Saudi Arabia?
So it's a great question. So the ability to run the machines and the other technologies needed to make solar trackers are important to teach people. For example, we have these super smart electronic controllers, and we do all the assembly of these Saudi Arabia. So this is electronics. That's value add, even more than the factory jobs. But training people up for factory jobs is super important. We've seen in the U.S., for example, a big problem. People aren't being trained for manufacturing anymore. So I think Saudi Arabia can become a real, force in manufacturing, which I think the government is very interested in. They're, very interested in the future of Saudi Arabia, and to your point.
And invested, yeah, in that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because in the end of the day, Saudi Arabia is the biggest economy in here, the biggest human capital, I would say, in the Middle East is also in Saudi Arabia. And having you contributing to that, I think that would be really interesting, especially with the scale of business, right? Like, what is your take on the Middle Eastern market when it comes to solar, the growth that happened in the past couple of years, or how do you forecast this to continue?
It should be great. I mean, back in 2017, there was a huge delegation from Saudi Arabia that came to New York and really was promoting the whole solar concept. And at that time, it seemed impossible what they're saying in terms of the scale. But now, Saudi Arabia is doing the impossible, and this huge growth in solar. It's one of the biggest markets now in the world in the solar business. I see just continued dramatic growth, and that's going to be really important for Saudi Arabia, and not just manufacturing jobs, but also electricity generation.
I want to ask, I'll make a little turn and come back to the same topic. So you worked in different industries, right? Like life science as well, and investment, technology, in different probably disciplines. So you met with different mentalities, I would say, or approaches to business, from the smaller scale startups to large corporate America. And then now, when you have such scale of business in Egypt, in Saudi Arabia, with totally different cultures, and mixing that and making the whole orchestrating, like the whole company, the whole group to work together, might be a challenge. So, if we take it from leadership perspective, as a leader for this organization, as the builder of this organization that you have built from the ground and founded that back in the days, and you have expanded regionally, including different regions, different cultures, and all of them working in such a synchrony to make you successful. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been in the top three. You wouldn't have won these latest tenders in Saudi Arabia for these gigascale PV projects. Tell us a little bit more. How do you do it as a leader of an organization to orchestrate all of that to work together?
That's a great question. So, one thing that's interesting is I've met people from obviously all around the world, and the Middle Eastern people I've met are, warm.
Yeah.
They're easy to deal with. Very like chop. People get down to business and aggressively. So a lot of ways it's similar to the business, the way people do things in the United States. Especially, I spent 31 years in New York, and they really move fast there.
Yeah. Can imagine.
So that's kind of refreshing. It's the culture for me has been pretty easy to personally assimilate with, and that's been a big part of it.
So you see the similarity, let's say, in cultures between the United States and Middle East and here. And do you see the same in corporate America, being also like one of the students of corporate America back in the days? We always talked about agility, like being agile in business, being on top of things, thinking out of the box. Do you feel a similar culture here when you work with the local teams in the Middle East? And do you feel confident to achieve the same success like you did in the United States and other parts of the world?
No, absolutely. And in fact, our ramp up in the Middle East has been super fast, faster than some other regions. I think partially due to the open-mindedness of the people both in Saudi Arabia, and especially a lot of the owners are out of Dubai and Abu Dhabi, right? So Masdar, Aqua, the people we kind of run into the most.
They're in Dubai and Abu Dhabi.
Yeah, absolutely. And their open-mindedness to look at a new vendor. They do very careful research, but they're kind of more open-minded than some other regions of the world, which I think is part of the success here is the ability to move really fast, implement these huge-scale projects quickly. And it took a while to get started, but once things got started, it's been a really open-minded, quick, and properly researched ramp up for the people in these regions, I'd say.
Nice. To be honest, maybe one of the facts that are not very much noticed is that the Middle East is not just an exporter of, let's say, oil and gas, but it's an exporter of green energy in the form so far of developing projects globally. Because the local developers in UAE and Saudi Arabia went to develop projects in the UK, massive offshore plants, in Central Asia, projects across Africa, and there's an export of know-how, engineering, and the ability to develop massive projects, let's say, at a global scale. Now, with you starting manufacturing in Saudi, do you see this transferring, like with time, into an export hub as well, and to produce beyond what would you consume, let's say, regionally or in Saudi Arabia for the local projects, probably exporting to Europe, exporting to Africa, and so on?
That's a great question. I think initially that's not happening, but it's understanding what I feel about Saudi Arabia government especially, that's something which with the vision to the future is possible and makes sense. It's going to take a while to build enough capacity here to more than serve what's needed in Saudi Arabia especially, but I think that's a great question, and I think it's definitely a possibility of that.
To have, because there have been talks, to be honest, by many companies to establish local manufacturing hubs, but only a few, like GameChange, that have actually managed to establish this, let's say, manufacturing hub, took that very seriously. Also, you won great projects in the region, and this is I would say what GameChange is doing today is a blueprint for many other manufacturers, not just in tracker manufacturers, but also probably modules, inverters, all BOS parts. And I know that you have also in some new or venture in GameChange to do BOS systems, transformers mainly. Would you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, sure. So there's a big trend, not just for solar PV, but general electrification all around the world. So building out the grid, the ability to service data centers for AI and other things, and so on, electric cars, right? So there's more than just solar. So we see a vision to provide transformers not just for the solar industry and wind, but all these other verticals. Electrification is super important. And some markets which bring in solar and don't have a lot of energy generation to begin with need to build out the grids super fast. And even in markets with an aging grid like the United States, there's a need for replacements and all this electrification and the data centers and the AI and all that, and electric cars, right? So a GameChange, we went around 2-3 years ago, and once again we asked our customers, what do you want? And they're screaming for transformers. There's a huge shortage of transformers, and it's not just the medium voltage, the small ones, but the high voltage, the big ones. And that's something where we like to meet unmet needs. Again, not just in solar, but also some other verticals.
Nice. Okay, and now in the end, I will try to ask questions that we didn't prepare for. Yeah, but give it a thought, and thinking about the people that be watching us, especially those that would have been probably for years in corporate world or have their own business or so, and they would love to learn from this, let's say, example that you have done with a GameChange. And you as a leader, what would you provide them with an advice or an opportunity that you see and tell them, okay, that's something that I believe in, this will be big as part of the bigger, let's say, energy transition, let's say, movement, and it would be worth it to look into that direction. What do you see as an probably underserved segment or something futuristic that will pick up, let's say, and with time and have a great momentum in the coming probably 10 years?
So the technology is getting more mature, but there's definitely opportunities for the ability for robotics out there. And I think part of it's just looking for unmet needs. I mean, we found that our customers are a great free R&D resource.
Yeah.
And I think understanding markets where there's huge need for solar PV, especially coupled to storage, understanding where those markets are, and entrepreneurial financiers of projects and developers of projects to go into these local markets and see how to put the projects together and then go find the financing. I mean, those are early stage developers who set them up, and then we'll sell those projects to the big guys to build out and finance and so on. So that's a huge opportunity, I think, in many markets,
To be honest, I agree with you. It's there are not many players in that segment, this kind of early stage development, the integrators of, let's say, thoughts, technologies, finding the right spot, the right grid connection, and then bringing things together. And then, as you said, probably if they don't have the financial capability, they can sell it to a bigger developer to move forward. Do you see this as a viable or a functioning, let's say, business in the States that can be replicated in here?
Absolutely, yeah. In the States, it's particularly complicated because there's 50 states, 50 different governments. But getting, to your point, getting the interconnect, getting the land, and sometimes getting a PPA for power off taker. And there's, again, a huge growth in data centers, AI in the United States and other places in the world. But I think everywhere in the world, there's a need for these developers to get things going, the entrepreneurs to get these things going early on.
Since you mentioned AI, maybe one last thought. AI probably is good for the energy business, because it requires energy. This means there will be more projects, probably more solar plants built to serve data centers. But how do you see the implementation of AI in our industry, in the solar industry? Is this something that would have a good potential, let's say, moving forward? Because as we know, like trackers, you already have sophisticated algorithms in place. And it depends also a lot on the weather, let's say, data that you receive and all of that. So do you see that AI will play a bigger role moving forward in our segment?
Well, I say AI, to use the term loosely, in the solar industry, it's, to your point, more algorithms, I'd say, but they're getting more fancy. And some of them have to self-learn. For example, the encryption network we use along our trackers to keep the data safe has an element of self-learning to it in terms of routing and so on. So, but AI in general for the entire grid is super important. So the grid is quite complicated, especially in old markets like the US and Europe, and having the ability to figure out how to get energy when you need it. For example, electric cars. So if you think of electric cars, they're kind of like a huge distributed battery asset. So the ability to take energy from electric cars when the prices on the grid are going through the highest or busiest time for the grid, and kind of use that battery as a power source for all these different busy times of day. And then when the energy is cheaper, sometimes a day you can recharge. So the intelligence to distribute intelligence to get this whole grid to work properly and most efficiently, there's a lot of upside there.
Okay, amazing. Especially like with growing grids and here developing grids in the region, whether it is, let's say, like GCC countries where the grid is expanding, it's becoming, let's say, bigger, and there's the transition, right? Because when we say that we are going to decarbonize the grid, or by 2030, like in Saudi Arabia, the target is to phase out all liquid fuel power plants, 50% clean energy, and that's something that definitely changes the dynamics on the grid, and there is a lot in there to implement, as you mentioned, in order to ensure that stability and the robustness of the future grid. I think with this, we've got the questions covered. I'm very happy to have you on board, Andrew. I'm glad that the audience managed to meet one of the leaders and change makers. It's not just a GameChange is the name of the company, but really Andrew is a change maker because he was one of the pioneers who transformed the industry into the level today. The level when today is level when solar is not just doable, it is affordable, it is competitive, and it is actually more competitive than traditional power plants, and it makes a lot of sense to have solar from all the aspects, not just from the environmental aspect, right?
Absolutely.
So, thank you very much for joining me today, Andrew. I'm very happy and privileged to have you in our podcast.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.